19th, Independence Day, we are encouraging all to wear all national colors. Resilience, innovation, and security for Independence 2020.
Even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib, it's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
Welcome back to Island Tea with your faves, Kevon and Amali, featuring Azim on the ones and 96s and Jade on the OBS and the mouse. And we are about to eat local with the Honorable Mark Brantley, Premier of Nevis. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I apologize to you. I was listening earlier and then I had a internet glitch, it appears. So please forgive me for being late. I don't like to be late.
But you're the boss.
I think it's an indication of one's respect when one is on time. So
Definitely.
I really appreciate you having me on to have this conversation. And although I'm technologically challenged, I hope that we can have a good chat this morning.
I think we should be fine. Oh yes. So before we start, we have to talk a little bit about your infamous style and fashion. What should we expect? Some extra outfits for the weekend?
But that's in my wife's hands. So if I knew you'd ask that question, I would have her on to talk to you about that.
She's the stylist.
Each independent, she decides that she's going to take care of that. So I have no idea.
Okay.
That sounds so exciting.
The key to a long marriage is doing what your wife says. So whatever she
noted.
I will wear. Yeah. So I don't know.
Oh boy. So let's start off with we have listeners happening that are tuned in from all around the world apparently. Let's start off with introducing yourself. Tell us who Mark Brantley is, and tell us a little bit about who he is.
Well, as you know, I'm currently the Premier of Nevis. I function also as Foreign Minister for St. Kitts and Nevis, so I play a dual role. In terms of quick history, I was born in Hanley's Road. That's in the Gingerland area. When I was probably about 8 years old, I moved to Brown Hill. It's about 2 miles from Charlestown, where I grew up. And I would have attended the chapel school, as we used to call it, which was a school for the Methodist Church. And then from there, when they built the Gingerland Primary School, now called the Joyceland Libert Primary, I would have been the first batch of students to go there. When my family moved, of course, I moved to Brown Hill and then attended the Prospect Primary, which is now called the Ivor Walters Primary, and from there to Charlestown Secondary School. Did well academically, couldn't run, couldn't jump, but was okay with the books. That I think opened some doors for me. So I did well at O levels, went on to A levels, and then from there won a scholarship to go to UWI, where I did law. I then went to Norman Manley Law School. I graduated first in class, which was significant at the time because it was first in the entire region. And then from there, I won a further scholarship to go to Oxford University, where I did postgraduate work. I then opted to come home because I always wanted to be home. I had job offers in New York, I had job offers in London, in the BVI and elsewhere, but I wanted to be here in Nevis. And so I decided to come home. And I've been here ever since. I practiced initially as a lawyer, had some measure of success there. And then I suppose lost my senses and decided to get involved in politics. So here I am today, and I'm trying my best to make a contribution. So that is as precise a version as I can give, given the limited time that we have available to us on the show today.
Okay, brilliant. And you ended that, where we want to begin actually, which is your transition from law into politics. So I wonder what time, what year did you transition from the law to the politics, and what inspired that?
To be entirely frank, I've always had an interest in politics, but I was more interested in the political commentary. I was interested in the idea of politics as opposed to participatory politics or elective politics. I recall when I got back from Oxford, I was young, felt, having gone to the number one university in the world, I thought that I had something to offer. And I used to write these long treatises. I would stay in my office until 3 and 4 in the morning, writing policy papers on things like financial services and how we could do it better.
Right.
And I used to send these long documents to the government, and they never responded to any of them. And it was a little disheartening because I felt that as a young Nevisian, I had so much to offer and nobody was studying me. I wasn't getting any attention at all. So that was, I thought to myself, and then I used to visit ministers because I'm a very, very pro-education, and particularly for poor people. I grew up very, very poor. And I thought that education was really my way out of poverty. And I think it's the only proven way for people to advance themselves individually, families to advance themselves, and for the communities and society as a whole to advance itself. And so even now in my public life, you always hear me talking about scholarships because I was the beneficiary of scholarships, without which perhaps I would not have been able to get the education that I got. So I was very pro that. And I remember I used to go to the ministers and say, listen, there's a young man from this area, a young woman from this area. I think they're bright. Can you help? And again, it was always a struggle to get the attention of the politicians. And then after a while, I just thought to myself, well, instead of going and talking to them and asking them to do things, why don't I try to do it myself? And try to help people. Even so, however, I still did not, I wasn't sure about it. I had a very successful law practice. I had offices here in Anguilla. I was doing work in BVI in Dominica and Grenada.
Wow.
I traveled to places like, Hong Kong and elsewhere to give expert evidence, states in the United States. I had a very, very robust law practice, a commercial law practice. And, we handled some significant cases. I mean, we were doing cases in Nevis involving companies valued at $50 billion US. So we're talking about big, heavyweight litigation. But after a while, it becomes unfulfilling. Making money is useful, but at the end of the day, it is not all that there is to life. And I got to a point where I wanted to do something different. I'd been approached by both leaders at the time, the Honorable Joseph Parry and the Honorable Vance Amory, asking me to join, in the case of Parry, to join the NRP, in the case of Vance, to join the CCM. And I weighed the options, and my wife was ambivalent. She doesn't like politics at all. And so, she had to be persuaded. But we went back and forth on it for a while. And then in 2006, after the CCM lost the election in Nevis and went into opposition after 14 years in government, I finally took a decision to enter politics, and I preferred the CCM, and so I entered politics in opposition. That is unusual because normally people gravitate to the party in government. But I gravitated to the party in opposition, and at the time also Alexis Jeffers, who's now the Federal Minister of Agriculture and the Deputy Premier of Nevis, he also came into the fold at the same time.
Okay.
And so together, we started, we brought the youth and the vim, vigor, and vitality, the energy to the party. The party had just suffered a loss, I think it was in June or July of 2006. And then, of course, we had the tragic death of Malcolm Gishard, who at the time was still a federal representative and a representative for number 9, Nevis 9, and leader of the opposition at the federal level, but had lost government in Nevis at the NIA level. And just a year after I entered politics as a senator on the opposition benches in Nevis, I was thrust into the deep end when I was asked by the party to contest the by-election to fill Malcolm's seat. And that's where the sheriff was born, and the rest, as I said, I won that election by a landslide, 30 votes. And thereafter, it has been, sort of from step to step and from stage to stage. So I'm content, though, that I must be doing something that is at least the voters appreciate, because I have increased my margins significantly in each election that I've been able to run. And just for the record, I was listening the other day and they were talking about the politicians on St. Kitts, and persons, of course, like Dr. Timothy Harris, who's well loved and very popular in his constituency and has done extremely well, and others. And they were commenting on how many elections. And I think that you ought to recognize that I have actually run in 2007, 2010, 2011, 2013, 2015, 2017, 2020. I've actually had 7 elections in the space of the last 14 years.
Wow.
So it's been an interesting journey, and so far I think quite rewarding. I've tried to do the best that I can to help here in Nevis and, of course, the wider Federation. And I believe that we have had some setbacks, to be sure, but we've also had some successes that I hope we can talk about.
Oh, yeah, we are going to get into that very, very shortly. Very, very, I'm excited. So firstly, you mentioned that you joined the CCM, while right after the horrible loss, in whenever that happened. Why the CCM and not the NRP? Because I asked Sean Richard the same question during the campaign, and he spoke about party ideology, right? He said, he had offers from both Labour and from PAM, to join their ranks. And so I asked him, why did you choose PAM? And he said, because of what PAM believed in, what PAM's vision was in terms of ideology and the way forward for the country. So why CCM and not NRP?
Well, I'm going to answer differently to Sean Richards, because frankly, I don't see there's much difference in ideology. in politics now in St. Kitts and Nevis, or in politics even regionally. There's some countries you see a marked difference. You can talk about right and left, or even moderate, conservative, liberal. Here, I think that politics here is more about personality. It's more about who people feel is competent and who people feel that they have confidence in. I mean, let us look at, say, the Labour Party that was in office for 20 years, and then we transitioned to a unity government. The prime minister that we now have came out of Labour.
Right.
What fundamental difference in policy or philosophy have we seen? I think it comes down to who people have confidence in to manage the country in an effective way. And that, I think, was for me, what the decision was all about. It was who I had more confidence in.
Okay.
Mr. Parry likes to say that I'm his cousin, although he publicly said the other day that we are not friends. Perhaps it means that we are more than friends. But the truth is that I thought that Mr. Amri at the time, there was more gravitas to him, even in opposition. He had a team around him that I got along well with most of them. I had a sort of affinity, if you will, to those individuals. Mr. Parry, whom I also have tremendous respect for, the difficulty I had with him was the people around him. And I think that is still the downfall of the NRP. Some of their chief spokespersons are people who inspire zero confidence. They've done nothing with themselves, and all they do all day long is attack and castigate other people, sometimes innocent private citizens, for no apparent reason. I don't see how that could be an effective strategy. So for me, it really wasn't about Mr. Parry per se. I quite like Mr. Parry, I still do. I quite have a tremendous level of respect for him. I think it was a team that he had around him that, for me, was not inspiring. I thought we couldn't win with that team. And I'm all about winning. I think, regardless of what one says in politics, you have to win if you're going to make a difference.
Yes.
So, but having a strong opposition, that's fine, and that's great. But at the end of the day, governments are who set and implement policy, and you have to win if you want to be in government. So having a formula to get you into government is critical. And in 2006, when I came in, I set about that. By 2007, we won the by-election, and I think that put CCM back in its winning ways. So that by 2010, we won again. 2011, we had the infamous Black Fox in Cox, and so we lost by 14 votes with 14 rejected ballots, and 203 of my supporters removed overnight from the voters list.
Wow.
We went to court, we won that case, which created history because election petitions are notoriously difficult to win. But we went to court, we won that case, and we went on in 2013 to win that election convincingly. We won again in 2015 at the federal level. And then, of course, in 2017, I took over the leadership of CCM after Van Samry decided he would retire. And I became leader in October, and by December, took the party to the polls, and we won 4 of the 5 seats on offer at the local level in Nevis. Only the second time in history that has been achieved. And then in 2020, of course, on the 5th of June, we would have gone to the federal election, and we created history again, winning all 3 seats on Nevis for the first time in the history of CCM, which is a party that's 34 years old. So I feel that the progression is there, the statistics are there in terms of electorally what we've been able to achieve.
Okay, brilliant. Very quickly before we jump into the real meat of the interview, well, not the interview, the conversation. Growing up and leading into your transition from line to politics, I mean, you mentioned Joseph Parry and others, but who are the other politicians nationally, both locally in Nevis and in St. Kitts, did you admire or who inspired you to take that leap of faith into, the bullring?
As I said, insofar as the bullring, as you term it, is concerned, that really came about because I wanted to do more. I wanted to help, particularly young people. I felt that we needed somebody who had walked that path, who understood what it was like to be impoverished, to not have opportunity. I remember the days walking to school, rain or shine. If you were lucky, somebody would stop and give you a lift. I didn't have money for a bus. We were poor people. And having walked that path, having seen that one could achieve some measure of success, through education if opportunities were provided. Because I go back to where I started and say, were it not for scholarships that I won, I'm not so sure I would be where I am today. So I wanted to sort of cement that and to afford our people, particularly young people, a better way. And I thought that having, that focus and being involved in the process itself, rather than staying outside the process. Many people stay outside the process and criticize the process, or they have all the answers. I comment all the time publicly about those who want to play cricket from the pavilion, because they stay in the pavilion and they always are going to tell the batsman, you play the wrong shot, or they tell the bowler, you can't bowl.
Right.
But they themselves are never prepared to go out in the pitch, either to bat or bowl. So we constantly, I'm not suggesting that the pundits aren't necessary, but if all of us were just engaged in punditry, it means that nobody would actually be on the field doing the work. And what I found actually in St. Kitts and Nevis, and this might be controversial, but I found that the best and brightest of us tend to make a lot of money in our respective professions. So whether we're lawyers, doctors, construction, whatever it is, the best tend to rise to the top. Because people are making money, they are less inclined to get involved with politics. Because politics, if you're going to be honest as a politician, really does not pay. Despite what people talk about politicians making all kinds of money, I will tell you, and I will say to the nation and all those viewing, I took a tremendous pay cut when I decided to enter politics. When they say service, it really is service. And for me, being involved with that whole process was important. It was critical to sort of bring, at the time I didn't have the gray in my beard, I was much younger. The idea was that, more young people would gravitate to the process and really see that it could be done. And that over the years, I felt that those who couldn't succeed at anything else, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but those who had not demonstrated success in business or anything, were the ones who were gravitating to politics. We have seen many examples of that. In Nevis, we had some fellows who said, boy, I try everything, nothing works, so let me try politics. And I think that then becomes the recipe for you getting the worst possible people involved in the process. And that is where the allegations now of dishonesty and people stealing and corruption, I think, come to the fore. And so I thought that, let me, instead of just critiquing and engaging in punditry and staying in the pavilion and constantly criticizing the batsman, let me go out and bat and see if I can make a few runs. And so that is how sort of that transition for me came about.
Okay, brilliant. Next, based on the state of the nation when you entered politics to where we are now, how would you rate the nation's progress? And secondly, do you believe that the role you played in that progress was significant? And how so?
Well, let me, before I answer that, go back a moment, because you did ask me about who my influence was. And my only influence really in politics has been our sole national hero from Nevis, the Right Excellent and Right Honorable Sir Simeon Daniel.
Okay.
He was a mentor to me. He and my father were very, very close friends. And so I grew up around him. And I later, when I became a lawyer, joined his law firm that we later transformed. And so I had a very, very close relationship with him. And a lot of what I have tried to do is really a reflection of the things that he taught me. And a lot of what I'm trying to do now, even in attracting young people, identifying talent and trying to nurture and develop it, provide opportunities for them to study. I think this was a model that he used with many others. I won't get into the names, but he has helped so many of us to come through. And so I think that is a hallmark of great leadership, and that is what I'm trying to emulate. He rose to the highest heights of popularity and power in Nevis and St. Kitts Nevis, but he remained so humble and so dignified. As I've said, I think he epitomized dignity, and that is what I myself am trying to pattern myself off. So I think if there was one influence, it was Sir Simeon. I think he inspired an entire generation of us to do better. And I'm hopeful that whatever little time I'm allowed on the stage, that I too can inspire a few people to do better. Now, insofar as our nation, I think by any measure, St. Kitts and Nevis has improved dramatically. I looked recently at the politics in Jamaica and the election there. And I looked on because Jamaica, of course, is a significant country, far more resourced than we are in terms of people and resources, natural resources. And when I listened to the pitch that the politicians were making to be elected, and I hear them say things like, we're going to get water, pipe-borne water into your area. We are going to get a road into your area. These are things that we take for granted in St. Kitts and Nevis. In the island of Nevis, for example, little as we are, there is no area in Nevis that doesn't have water. There are no areas that don't have road access, and I mean proper road access, and we continue to improve that network of roads, of water distribution. When I look at the healthcare system and see the strides that we have made, is it perfect? Absolutely not. But sometimes when I hear our own people attack our country and call it down and try to belittle the achievements, and I say to myself, I wish sometimes they could spend some time in other places. Because if you go to some of the bigger countries, you go to the tourist resorts, or you go to the city centers and you stay at the hotels, it seems okay. But when you venture out into the hinterlands and you see how what I would call the real people live, I think that we are far and away ahead of most of our peers in the region, and far away ahead of most countries in the world. And I've had the privilege of traveling for a bit, so I think I'm qualified to speak to that. And I think that our people should appreciate the significant achievements and strides that we have made, whether it's law and order, whether it's infrastructural development, whether it's the economy, whether it's citizenship by investment. I'm very proud that St. Kitts and Nevis gave the world the idea of citizenship by investment. And yes, there have been critics, but we now have Portugal, we have Cyprus, we have Malta, we have, the UK, we have the US with the EB5 visa program, we have Canada, we have St. Lucia, Dominica, Antigua. They all copied St. Kitts and Nevis. And the fact that the smallest island, the smallest country, in the hemisphere, could have innovated to that level to come up with this idea that we could leverage our citizenship for investment and economic advancement. And one must give Dr. Simmons credit, our only living national hero, because it was his administration that came up with this idea. The idea, of course, was later refined by Dr. Douglas as Prime Minister, but the kernel of the idea, it was the first time in the world that this had been attempted. So when we look at these things, we look at a Kim Collins who went on the world stage and beat everybody. And we continue to just whatever. We look at Little Nevis, having produced all these cricketers who have graced the world stage as West Indies cricketers. El Comido Willett was the very first Leeward Islander to play for the West Indies team. And we can go on and on and on. The reality is that we have achieved a lot. We have punched well above our weight as a country. When people look at us and our size, and as foreign minister, I get it all the time where people say to me, I'm amazed at how much you can achieve with the tiny foreign ministry that you have, because we have hundreds of people in our foreign ministry and we're not seeing the results that St. Kitts and Nevis has been able to achieve. So I think that by any measure, we have done extremely well. And one of the things I would like to encourage you, gentlemen, because you're young people, is that we see the value in our country, that we continue to promote what is best in our country, and that those who are bent on negativity and pulling down and seeking to suggest that we are doing so badly here, that we are quick to correct them and to point out to them that our country has made tremendous strides as a young country, only 37 years old, and from whence we have come to where we now are. I think it has been amazing. I am 51 years old, and I will tell you that in my 51 years, I have seen such a tremendous transformation of the island of Nevis. The house in stock. I grew up in a home where we didn't, there was no electricity in our neighborhood. You had one little black and white 13-inch television that the whole neighborhood came to watch. That was the nature of what we endured at the time. So I feel that we have made tremendous strides.
Okay, and very good. So I guess you'd rate our progress, a 10 out of 10 based on,
Well, I don't know, 10 out of 10 suggests you have nowhere further to go. What I will say is I will rate it highly, but of course there's always more work to be done.
Okay.
I listened earlier, you mentioned some of the social issues that, say, Prime Minister Mia Mottley is trying to tackle. I think all of those are relevant issues which would benefit from a wider discussion in terms of where we go as a country. But I think by any measure we have done well. And insofar as my own contribution, I think that chapter is still being written. And so I will continue to do my best, and then it will be for others, obviously, to determine whether or not I made a contribution to our development.
Well, Jade is almost as if he like know exactly what I'm going to ask.
Right?
He keep answering all the questions before I ask them.
A prepared man.
Because my next question was actually going to be, do you think that you played the role you saw yourself playing or you wanted to play over the last, several years in politics? I mean, you ran in 7 elections locally and nationally, sorry. So looking back on where we've come to where we are now, to where we are now, do you think that you played the role Mark Brantley wanted to play in that development?
I think my role is still being played. I don't know for how much longer, because
to date,
I think politics is a young people game. The energy that it requires. I really admire people like Van Samry and others who went on for a very long time and still have the passion for it. I don't see myself being in politics at 70 and those kinds of ages. I would want to get up to a point where I can offer advice to others that are coming in. And as a party, the CCM is currently in a rebuilding stage, even though we are winning and have won every election except one since 1992 in Nevis. And now we're winning by convincing margins, where we are actually winning all the seats. We're still in a process of rebuilding. And one of the things that we're trying to do now is to bring our youth to the fore. And so we have some youth arm that we're very proud about. We have
you had the elections recently, yes?
Yes. Yeah. We have a lot of youth now involved in our process, and we are going to try to populate our ministries and populate our boards and all of that with more youth going forward. So I'm still in that process. I think my chapter is still being written, and I've always, I suppose, attracted some level of controversy simply because I'm outspoken, and I don't believe in I think politics is public business, and one should be willing to engage with the public. And that is why whenever I'm offered an opportunity to be on radio or television, I tend to accept it, because I don't believe in the backroom dealings aspect of politics. I think we come to the people, we let the people know what the issues are. There'll sometimes be good news, and there's sometimes it's going to be bad news, because that is the nature of life. And the life of a nation is no different to the life of the individuals that make up that nation. There are good times and bad times. We're going through a very bad time now, for example, with COVID-19. So for me, have I made that contribution? I think that I have a little bit more to do before I exit stage left. I'm trying to gauge my exit properly so that I am not pushed, but rather I prefer to jump. And so we're going to see how that goes. But I think that I'm still trying. I'm still trying at the local level. I'm still trying at the national level. And I think at the end of the day, it will be for you, gentlemen, who more than likely will be the ones to write our history, for you to determine whether or not I warrant a footnote.
Exactly. So be nice.
I'm trying to be nice. Even though you criticize my socks, I'm still trying to be nice.
He didn't let it go.
I think it's more
those are what you call socks up?
Oh boy.
Yes.
So very quickly, where do you personally see the Federation going over the next 10 years and the next 20 years? And I mean with regard to things like education, aviation, tourism, agriculture, manufacturing, basically economic development. You said when you entered politics for the first time, you entered politics to make a difference, to help people, to make change. You've been in the ring for quite some time now. Not as long as others, but still some time. And you say you're not finished batting yet for the people. So in terms of the next, the short term and long term, vision that you have for the country, where do you see us going?
I see more development is necessary on both islands. We have had a very lopsided sort of approach to development in St. Kitts and Nevis. St. Kitts, of course, is the bigger island and naturally has consumed most of the resources that have come in. Nevis has sort of been the smaller sister, so to speak, with fewer people in terms of a population, and has consumed far less of the resources. I think that what we need is a national plan. A national plan in the sense that we get away from the St. Kitts versus Nevis, or the Nevis versus St. Kitts approach to development. And we determine, for example, that, hey, we are going to do, I don't know, an avocado plantation. and it's best suited on Nevis. Let's do it there. We're going to do a poultry industry. It's best suited in St. Kitts. Let's do it there. We need a particular type of boutique hotel. It's best suited in Nevis. There's a wonderful site there. Let's do it there. And so we have that approach instead of what we do now, where it's almost as if, investment comes and you try to capture all of it on St. Kitts or on Nevis, as the case may be. I think that would help if we had a national approach to development, a national approach to all that we do. That would be very helpful. Insofar as the economy is concerned, that is always where the rubber meets the road, because that is where you grow and develop, and that is where our people benefit in terms of being able to afford to live.
Indeed.
So the economy and economic development, I think that we can do more in tourism. I think that the two islands working closer together can achieve much more than we're achieving now. St. Kitts, for example, has a competitive advantage in cruise. Nevis has a competitive advantage in stay-over visitors. And again, if you go back to a national strategy, you would want to encourage the parts of the country with a competitive advantage. You look at, say, a country like Mexico, which is a vast country compared to us, but you would realize that the tourism belt in Mexico is in a particular area. So you don't see Mexico City talking about tourism, because that's not where the government nationally has said that we would like to see tourism flourish. So, these are some of the issues, I think, but it comes from planning. I have seen in countries, particularly those in Asia, where they have sometimes 50-year plans.
Right.
We don't do that. We go from election cycle to election cycle. In Nevis, the election cycle is even shorter. In St. Kitts, you have at least 5 years. In Nevis, is every 2.5 years we have an election. And so it's difficult sometimes to plan, because proper policy requires time. If you're going to implement something where you say, listen, I want to turn the corner on crime, and so I want these interventions to happen, and I'm going to start with primary school children, you realize that it's an investment that will take years, because you're trying to change behavior. You're trying to change attitudes. And that takes time. So if, of course, people are looking for results in 2 years, then it becomes very difficult. And I think that is why a lot of us as politicians, we build a road, we put up a building, because you could finish that in quick time. And you say to people, look at this road, look at this building. Yeah. Not to suggest that is not important, because infrastructural development is important. But I think if we get to a stage where we have a national plan, that we have buy-in from the country, we have buy-in from the opposition, we have a contribution from various stakeholders, so that whoever comes into government knows that this is our national approach. And I think that would help in terms of ensuring that we don't have 2 or 3 years under one government doing one thing, and then the next government changes it, and we have to start over again, and that cycle continues. So I feel that there's work to be done. I feel that we have much more to do, but I am very optimistic about this small country of St. Kitts and Nevis. I think that by all indicators, we have done extremely well. We have met our challenges in a head-on way. We had a serious challenge with crime and insecurity in the country. We have approached it. I know the approach has not garnered fullest support. There have been criticism, but that is the beauty of a democracy. In our democracies, we have to be prepared to support those having a voice who are opposed to us, right, even as we support ourselves and those who have a voice that is similar to us. Because I have learned in my life that even your harshest critics sometimes have something of value to pass on, if you're only prepared to listen. And so I don't shut down people. I have my own personal mantra, which is to ignore the noise, because clearly some of it is noise that people are simply making. But it's important to listen and to filter out, but also as leader to take advantage of the ideas and to take the ideas on board. So I think a national plan which has buy-in, where we can say this is a 10-year plan for St. Kitts and Nevis. This is a 20-year plan for St. Kitts and Nevis. And we know that whatever government comes into office will continue with the execution of that plan, because if they were in opposition at the time, they themselves would have contributed to it, I think would be a matter that would be helpful.
Well, that's something that we've really discussed here, even on the show, the need for something that extends past the election cycle. And it's really heartwarming to hear you say that. And you every time you speak about it, you say the national plan for St. Kitts and Nevis. And that is something that I find interesting, because based on your answer just now, it seems as though you are in full support of these two islands staying together, staying as one federation. But we have seen in times past ramblings and discussions of secession and possibly independence separately for both states. So, like I said, I'm going to assume that your personal position is one where you see St. Kitts and Nevis going forward. However, I do think that there is somewhat of a culture, a bit of a separation between persons on both islands. And this is for me personally, seeking to understand where that comes from, and trying to figure out how best do we move forward. Because if we are going to have national plans, if we are going to have both nations, or both islands, moving together as one, like that cannot only be on paper in policy, but also in the hearts of the people. So where does that sense of separation come from, traditionally and historically, especially now, this is independence time, and how do you think we could help to mend those bridges?
Well, I think you asked an excellent question, and unfortunately, most of us shy away from these types of discussions, which are, to me, the discussion that the country needs to have in an open, frank, and honest way. Yes, secession. In fact, I was one of those as a younger person who was very ingrained and involved in that secession effort that was made in Nevis. I was asked by the then Premier Van Zemer to chair the Constitutional Commission to develop a new constitution for Nevis. And I am an unabashed supporter of the Nevisian people. That, however, doesn't mean that one cannot adapt and seek to, if you will, come to a position where the nation progresses together. When the CCM joined Team Unity in the lead up to the 2015 elections, I think this was the promise. And for people like me, this is still the promise of a Team Unity government, that we would try to get away from the isms and the schisms that hitherto separated us, and that we would seek to govern for St. Kitts and Nevis, that we would see our country as a single country, not as two islands in competition with each other, where when one has the upper hand, they take advantage of the other, that kind of thing. And that was the promise. That promise, I think, is still to be realized, but it is a promise that we have to work on every day. It is not something that's going to happen overnight, and part of that is due to the history that you speak about. And I think it's important that our young people understand our history. There has always been a high level of interaction, intermarriage, a sort of socio-political connection between our two peoples. You talk to a lot of Kittitians, and I marvel all the time when I engage with my brothers and sisters in St. Kitts, and they're quick to remind me that my father from Nevis, my mother from Nevis, my grandmother come down here and live in Newtown. You go into a place like Newtown, there are lots of people there who trace their roots just a generation ago to Nevis. So, but understanding the culture, I think, is important. And we have had a period in our history when the relationship was not a kind relationship. It was not a good relationship. Mm-hmm. And when we think, for example, about how now national heroes, so Simeon Daniel and persons like that came to prominence, they actually came to prominence on a pro-Nevis platform, fighting against Labour and Bratcher, national hero Robert Llewellyn Bratcher at the time, because the sense was that St. Kitts was all about St. Kitts, and Nevis and Anguilla ultimately suffered. And so the people of Anguilla didn't even bother to go through with anything. They took up arms. And they decided, listen, we don't want St. Kitts here. And they threw out the governor. Mm-hmm. And that has been widely written about. Anguilla seceded by way of force. And it left St. Kitts and Nevis in this relationship. And there's still remnants of it. And that is why I say there's still work to be done. There's still people who, when you hear them talk, it's almost as if, you and Nevis are a step cousin. You're a stepchild somehow. You're not an equal. You're not a brother or sister. I said recently something, I didn't think it was controversial, but I'm told that it ruffled a lot of feathers. When I said that any boy or girl in Nevis should be able to aspire to be prime minister. should be able to aspire to be Governor General, judge, any position that the country has to offer, ambassador, because they are a citizen of the country, imbued with the same rights, responsibilities of any other citizen. And equally, any boy or girl in St. Kitts, whether you're from Newton Ground, Deep Bay, you're from Bastia, it doesn't matter. You should be able to know that you can aspire to be anything in your country. Mm-hmm. The notion that some seem to have, that some positions are reserved for those from Nevis or those from St. Kitts, as the case may be, I think that we have to get past that if we're going to see our country as one. So my short answer is that when we joined Unity, I said publicly, and I say so now again, that I think it represented the last best chance for our country. Why I said that? Because it was bringing together disparate parties from different perspectives and trying to forge a single unit. And if Unity with PAM, PLP, and CCM cannot achieve that sense of oneness of purpose as a nation, then I don't know who else is going to be able to achieve it. Mm-hmm. We had 20 years under the Labour administration. Prior to that, we had 15 years, I believe it was, of PAM and NRP. Mm-hmm. Labour was about 15 years, then it became Labour and NRP because the NRP had jumped from PAM to join with Labour. And we never saw that manifestation of oneness of purpose as a country. So here we now have Unity. And I am involved in Unity, and I think it will be for us, PLP, PAM, and CCM, representing as we do now 9 seats out of 11 in the federal parliament. It will be for us to determine whether or not we can formulate a collective approach to national development, where we can instill in you, young people in St. Kitts and the young people in Nevis, that sense of oneness of purpose, that we fight for each other, that we struggle together, and that we triumph together. And it is a message that I will not resile from, because I think if we cannot achieve it, then arguably all will be lost and we will never achieve it, and our country will be split apart. Mm-hmm. Nevis will be forced to go, and St. Kitts will be forced to go. And that has implications for all of the economic intercourse and the social intercourse that we currently enjoy. So I think your question is an excellent one. It's a question I think that should be asked of all who are in leadership positions or aspire to be in leadership positions, because the people, in my respectful view, get along very well. Now some of you young men are coming over here, the young men in Nevis are complaining that the most beautiful young women now are seeking boyfriends in St. Kitts.
Amali
is responsible for that.
And that is correct. And that is correct.
Amali was not the only name mentioned to me, but I was on the top of the list. So the issue is that, there's a level of interaction. You can't have any fete in St. Kitts now and Nevis people aren't there. Look around Music Festival. Look at the White Sands event. Sometimes I think I'm at an event in Nevis, a number of divisions. Then look at Culturama in Nevis. You can't have no jamming now in the roads in Nevis without the people of St. Kitts coming over and supporting.
Yeah, man, so one family.
The truth is, there's a high degree of interaction already. Mm-hmm. It is at the political level that I think you tend to have the friction. The friction. And that I think needs to be resolved.
Yeah, and that leads me to I have two more questions for you. This one, which should be a short one because we're almost out of time. And then a little bit longer one after, but okay. But that leads into this question here. I mean, for what we just spoke about in terms of actually operating and living as one people, that requires an unprecedented level of political maturity from the folks that are currently involved in politics.
Yes.
I mean, based on your words this morning, I mean, it seems like you are ready personally to take that leap into actual literal oneness between the two islands. But I don't want, I'm not asking to bash your colleagues, but do you feel like the rest of your colleagues are actually on that level and willing to engage with you in that serious conversation?
I think that is part of my difficulty, and I'm not focused on my colleagues per se. I think I want to widen that to the political directorate at this point, mm-hmm. Opposition and government.
Right.
We spend so much time, I think, jockeying for position and bashing each other and trying to undermine sometimes each other, and that we don't I think in an honest and open way, confront the issues that the country needs to confront. You see, this type of conversation that we're having here, that needs to happen more often. It needs to happen for longer. It needs to happen on a national stage, where at the end of the day, people are not offended that a division says, listen, we want a better share, or we want a greater share of the national pie. You know, that people are not offended and things of that. When, you know, a Kitchen says, well, listen, I believe that the prime minister should come from Sinkis because Sinkis is bigger. You know, I think that what we need are conversations.
Honest conversations.
People are not to be afraid of those conversations. Insofar as, you know, there's some simple things, gentlemen and lady, that I feel that we can do just by a conscious effort. One of those things, for example, is that when we speak at the national level, we remember the name of the country. I can't begin to tell you how many times I've heard high officials of St. Kitts and Nevis representing St. Kitts and Nevis who refer to the country of St. Kitts.
Right.
It may sound simple. It may even sound...
It actually disgusts me, actually, personally speaking.
But, you know, when you hear people at that level who seem not to be able to remember that the country is St. Kitts and Nevis. Now, imagine you're sitting down in Nevis, you're listening to this speech from somebody who's your representative, because that person is speaking at the national level. And you hear them continue to talk about the country of St. Kitts and what St. Kitts is doing, and St. Kitts is this and St. Kitts is that. You get that sense that you're being excluded. And that may sound simple, but just in terms of language that we talk about, you know, then you hear other things about, they say, oh, the federal government is helping Nevis because we get a portion of the CBI revenues that are coming in. And you say, why do you use the language of helping Nevis? If I'm helping somebody, I'm giving them something to which they're not entitled.
Exactly.
You know, and that kind of language. Now, if you say you're partnering with Nevis, you're doing the same thing, you know, but the language, it has a different connotation.
Yeah, it implies something different, yeah.
And so this is what I feel that could be an easy start if our leadership starts to say things in the right way and to express themselves in a way that people say, boy, this is really a paradigm shift to where we were. And that I think is important. And I think, you know, our structure in our society is such that when the leaders speak, I think that filters down to the populace in a very meaningful way. And so that's the level of language that I would like to see employed as we work out, of course, the framework for a better St. Kitts and Nevis going forward.
Right, and even things as simple as people writing down their address,
right?
Which rubs me the wrong way. Whenever I write an address, I would say, you know, it's number 4 Church Street, Bastia. I always put St. Kitts and Nevis.
Yeah.
But you find the majority of petitions, when they're writing an address on a piece of paper or document or anything, they put 4th Street, Bastia, St. Kitts, and leave off Nevis.
So but no. I want to be clear that the same thing happens in Nevis as well.
So
I'm making a statement here, a very broad statement, because most Nevisians, when they're going to write that address, they write Nevis as well.
You see, and that's part of the problem.
Right. So I'm saying on both sides of the narrows, if that thinking can change. But one of the things that is a pet peeve of mine as foreign minister, they laugh at me now within the CARICOM context, because when I put up that flag and say, I want to speak, I want to make an intervention, and they say, Foreign Minister of St. Kitts, I don't speak. And they look at me, and I say, well, I'm waiting. And they say, well, we called on you. I said, no, you said Foreign Minister of St. Kitts, and I'm the Foreign Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis. So, you know, it gets to a point now, however, where they know. So when they address me as the Foreign Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis. I said, to some it may sound like a small matter. But it is that language and that effort to be inclusive, which I think is an important start. And our leadership, I believe, needs to take that on board. And our political directorate, both in government and opposition, needs to take that on board and allow that to filter out throughout the country, that we are one country, we are striving to achieve together. You know, I see people from Nevis going to work at the Park Hyatt in St. Kitts. Do you know that from any point in Nevis, you can get to the Park Hyatt more quickly than if you were leaving St. Paul's or Sandy Point to go and work at the Park Hyatt?
Or town.
So just to put that in context for you, that I can leave Nevis, Butlers, Cotton Ground, take that water taxi 5 minutes, I'm at the Park Hyatt. You leave Newton Ground, you leave Keon, headed to Park Hyatt. And Park Hyatt is on St. Kitts, but I get there before you, coming from the other island of Nevis. I use that just as an example to say that there are synergies here, opportunities that we can exploit. If only we were to see this as one country and not see it as these two islands which are constantly battling and butting heads. So when we plan at the national level, we include the entire country. You know, they were doing the Holy Road project in St. Kitts. I was so pleased to see that truckers from Nevis took their trucks over to St. Kitts to work on that project. When the Four Seasons opened in Nevis, a lot of young people from St. Kitts, I'd hope he doesn't mind me calling his name, but I could think of somebody like Roger Brisbane, got his start in tourism at the Four Seasons in Nevis, and he was not the only one. Because that is the way the country should run. That is the way it should function. If there are opportunities in Nevis that Kittitians can take advantage of, then they do so, and vice versa. And I believe, however, that we can only get there once we have that change in our thinking. And the young people are already doing it. They're intermarrying, they're liming, they're fetting, they're partying together. I went to a party up here in Nevis the other day, and I saw a bevy of young ladies. I didn't know any of them. I asked who they were, and they were all coming over from St. Kitts to hang out with their friends over here. So there's a level of social intercourse that is already happening. The question is whether or not we, at the political level, can understand that and can move in that direction as well.
Exactly. And speaking about political maturity, yesterday was National Heroes Day, where we celebrated our heroes, the people who have, well, some of the folks who have helped, build our great nation, from the foundation come right up. And this is something that we speak about often on the show, the fact that all of our national heroes are politicians.
All.
Right? So that leads me into this question.
And all men.
And they're all
Yes.
they're all male politicians.
Yes.
So that leads me into this question. Firstly, how do you feel about folks from other walks of life being given that badge of honor as a national hero? Teachers, doctors, people in law, people in entertainment, people in the arts, people in in medicine. That's the first part of the question. And secondly, not to put you on the spot, but is there anybody you can think of who are past or still with us that you feel are well deserving of that badge of honor,
Other than
to be
Kevon.
made national hero?
Yeah, other than me.
Well, I heard somebody call into your show to indicate that some of you will be national heroes one day. I want to second that. What I'll say to you is this, that remember under our law, as you've pointed out in your show, we have 3 categories of national awards. We have the Medal of Honor, I think the Star of Merit, and then we have the National Hero. The National Hero is really reserved for those who have impacted the country in an above normal way.
Okay.
And certainly the country functions because all of us contribute. I commented publicly the other day that I got up at about 5 a.m. to take a morning walk, and I heard the garbage truck outside my house because the sanitation workers are out at that hour keeping Nevis clean. And most times people are still asleep. They don't even see them. You come and your garbage is no longer there and it vanishes. And sometimes we don't even stop to remember that these people have to get out of their beds at 1 and 2 in the morning to go and do that job. So we have heroes. Many of them are unsung. We have fathers who are playing the role of mother and father. We have mothers who are playing the role of mother and father, raising children, ensuring that those children are taken care of. And those two are unsung heroes. But we can't award everybody. And the thing about the national hero, it is really for those people who have been so exceptional that we think that they're deserving of that honor. And so whilst, yes, all are politicians, and whilst, yes, all are men, I think that they stand, all of them, on their own merit, head and shoulders above the others that we would have seen since then. And I think that, when you look at Sir Kennedy Simmons, who was our first prime minister, took us into independence, you look at the dignity with which he has lived his life and the decorum that he has always had about him, the quiet strength that he has brought. And you can, I think, whether you supported him or didn't support him, appreciate why he has been named a national hero. As Sir Simeon Daniel, who brought the Four Seasons Resort, brought the Bank of Nevis, brought Sixth Farm to Nevis for the first time, embarked on the most ambitious land reform that Nevis has ever seen, where now almost everybody in Nevis owns a piece of land. I think you have to acknowledge that these people occupy a sort of rarefied air. They are at a space where many of us will never achieve. And so I think that that has to be preserved. The danger, of course, in talking about more national heroes is that you run the risk of diminishing the status of the national hero. And so, yes, I think it's unfortunate that there's no woman. Yes, I think it's perhaps unfortunate that all that are there thus far are politicians. But we also have to be realistic that the politicians, certainly of that era, more than any other, shaped St. Kitts and Nevis in terms of what we are now. And it was their decisions and their policies that propelled us to where we are today. So would I like to see others? I think in the fullness of time. I'm not in any rush to name any new national heroes. I think that we have the Medal of Honor and we have the Star of Merit. We have some awards that come from the Queen, such as MBE and OBE and knighthoods and those. The different ways I think that we can recognize good performance from our people and committed service without necessarily populating our national hero list with dozens and dozens of people. I would point out as well that for the size of our population, St. Kitts and Nevis actually per capita has quite a high number of national heroes. If you compare, say, to Jamaica or Barbados and those with much larger populations, I think that we have done quite well in the circumstances. Am I seeing anybody today? My short answer is no.
Okay.
I think that there is a lot of work to be done. And as I said, somebody to ascend as national hero has to be someone who really has performed at an exceptional level. There are lots of people who have performed well, who have contributed significantly, but to me it has to be somebody who has that certain added something about them that we can all with one accord say, yes, this is an individual. So Robert Bradshaw wasn't loved in Nevis at all, but even Nevisians must admit that he laid the foundation for modern St. Kitts and Nevis. Paul Southwell, Nathaniel France, who was Nevisian, Sir Simeon Daniel, Kennedy Simmons. I think we look at these individuals and we could, whether we supported them or not, at least admit
and appreciate their contribution, yes.
Exactly, and a contribution at a level, I think, that went beyond the ordinary contribution. For example, you look at lawyers, and lawyers would serve 20, 30, 40 years. They make a lot of money. They perhaps in their lifetime do a few big cases that might impact us in terms of constitutional matters and the nature. But when you look at them and you say, well, okay, well, what have you done that takes you to the pantheon of a national hero? And I think that is the debate. I don't mean to bash lawyers. I'm a lawyer myself, but doctors similarly. What would you have done to take you to that extra level?
The extra mile.
So for me, it's not just about service, because everybody serves in some way or the other. It is also that word exceptional, which I think is important, that we can all look to these individuals and be inspired by them. And that to me is what a national hero ought to be. So I think that there's work to be done. I think that I share the view of the callers that if you young people continue in the vein that you're going, I think in time your names will be written large. And I believe that you are the ones who now will occupy that space. But for most of us who are more pedestrian, it is just a question of making a contribution and moving on so that others can come after to make their contribution as well.
Great. We have a question on the live posted by one of the viewers, and I think since you mentioned the Honorable Dr. Simeon Daniel, his legacy is known as the father of modern Nevis, and the person is asking, what do you hope your legacy will be as Premier?
It's difficult when one is in the middle of a journey to talk about legacy. I've often said questions of legacy are for historians. Those are for people who come after. It's always difficult, as I said, to mark your own paper. You leave that to the teacher. And the people in a democracy are the ones who ultimately will determine. What I would like to see, I would like it said of me that I came, that I was honest, that I made a contribution, that I took the country or the island of Nevis or the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, since I serve at that level as well, farther than I met it in a positive direction. And that I knew when it was time for me to clear the stage and allow younger people, more nimble, more physically able, more intellectually capable to come forward and continue that. Politics for me and leadership is like a relay. You pass the baton to the next person that's coming. And I've seen where people have been resistant to pass the baton and the result has been difficulty. I feel that I would like it said of me that when it was time to go that I went, but that I had prepared the way so that the next person that comes has a platform on which they can build. And so I see myself not as a revolutionary by any measure, but as somebody who's trying in a quiet way to transform our thinking and transform our way of life. And I hope that people will say of me that I instilled in our people, particularly the Nivision people, a sense of pride, that I instilled in us a sense of nationhood, a sense of nationality, that we recognize that there is value in this country called St. Kitts and Nevis. And that sense of patriotism, I feel, is critical if we are to move forward as one and if we are to achieve our fullest potential as a nation.
I mean, I see myself as a youth, and to hear you speak of succession and stuff like that. This is something that we've discussed on the show at length, and it's really refreshing to hear you speak about that. And I'm sure that when it's all said and done, your legacy would be one that you, your family, your supporters would be more than proud of. But we're quickly running out of time.
Sure.
But I'm going to ask the question that I'm sure everyone listening, and I'm sure all of us here in the studio wants to know, just before we wrap up. When the bridge coming?
That's a good question. I don't think there's a secret that I support the notion of a bridge, because I think that it will unleash the full economic potential of the country. You know, if you want to come over tomorrow to enjoy a restaurant in Nevis, you have to take a boat. Nothing is wrong with that. But the ability to hop in your car and drive, it is a more leisurely approach. You know, it brings us closer together.
For sure.
And if we are committed to this nation and this idea, this project of nationhood on which we embarked on the 19th of September 1983, I think that a bridge is the last aspect of it, to bring our islands together and to remove that sense of islandism and instead replace it with a sense of nationalism that I think we need if St. Kitts and Nevis is going to survive. So when it will come, I don't know. It is a matter that unity, the government has spoken about for some time. It found its way again into our manifesto, I believe, and this election cycle. And I know we have some proposals about it, but it will be a matter, I think, which will benefit from widespread consultation. We'll have to have a conversation with our people to determine that this is the way that they wish to go. But I can tell you that my vote is that I think it's an important project and one that will do a lot to bring us closer together. And I believe only in unity, only together, only in partnership can we achieve the fullest potential of St. Kitts and Nevis. I end by saying that I have every confidence in our country. We are a young country, we are a small country, but we have demonstrated that we have the level of intellectual capacity. We have a deep, deep reservoir of intellectual talent in this country. We have demonstrated, whether it's culture, the economy, medicine, academia, that we can compete with the region and the world and do so successfully. And so my heart is full as we celebrate 37 years of independence. I feel that St. Kitts and Nevis is in a good place despite the challenges of COVID-19. And I would like to encourage you youngsters to continue as you are going. I think this program, I will become a fan from now because I really wasn't aware. I'm not a big radio listener, but I really enjoy the program. Just the vibe and the talking to each other. I think that that's important, that we do that more in St. Kitts, we do that more in Nevis, and we do that more together. And so my sense is that we are proud, we ought to be proud of what we've achieved thus far, but there's work to be done. And we must put our shoulders collectively to the wheel to ensure that that work is done. Thank you for having me.
All right, well said. Well, Sheriff, thank you very much for joining us this morning. It was truly a very informative and enlightening conversation, I must say. I enjoyed it thoroughly. And thanks for taking time. You know, I'm sure you're extremely busy. You know, it's a week of independence. You know,
yeah,
the whole government is on their face, doing things. So we want to express, sincere gratitude for giving us some time this morning.
Absolutely. And please, if you need me in the future, just let me know. Thank you very much for having me.
All right, no problem. Have a good day, sir.
Okay. God bless.
All right, bye. All right, and that brings us to the end of this episode of Island Tea.
The extended end.
The extended end. Got to beg for more time.
But are you going Nevis tonight? And I just want to let the young men and old men of Nevis know that you can rest easy. I'm coming to work.
But yeah, actually, do you think we should announce who we're having tomorrow?
Yeah. I think we should.
While we have the eyes and ears.
Well, the viewers are up. Thank you, A Premier. So tomorrow morning on Island Tea, we're going to be graced by the presence of the Right Honourable Dr. Denzel Douglas, who is going to be sitting with us to discuss similar things.
Sharp boss.
Similar things as it relates to independence and where the country was to where it is now, and of course his contribution to the growth and development of St. Kitts and Nevis. So tune in tomorrow at 8 a.m. Yes, I realize. So tune in tomorrow morning for Island Tea for our special episode, our second special episode of the week. This is the first one. Where we'll be talking.
All our episodes are special, Amali.
They all are special.
These are extra special. We'll be talking to Dr. Douglas, and he's going to be in studio. Is that correct, Jade? Oh, wow.
He's in studio.
He's in studio tomorrow morning. So tune in tomorrow morning on WinFM 98.9. Have a great day. Is it still showering outside?
I hope so.
Wow.
Seems like it is.
It's a lovely day in St. Kitts.
Oh, I love it.
And the Kevon folks are very happy.
The farmers are.
Oh, yeah. All right, well, have a good day, folks. We're leaving.
And remember,
you can't be everybody's cup of tea because you're not a mug.
I forgot, I'm sorry.
I know you did. It's okay.